Hi, I'm Brooke. I opened my account on Christmas morning and saw balance, zero. My sister had drained everything, $130,000 gone overnight after she hacked my laptop. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Prove it, Ms. CEO." That smirk. It faded the moment the police walked in. But do you think that was the worst part? No. The worst part was watching my own mother defend her, even with the footage, even with the forged lease. So now I wonder, if your own family erases you, do you still exist? The house was still dark when I opened my eyes. I could hear the faint hum of the central heating kicking on, and a soft wind rustling through the tall fir trees outside. Eugene Winters had a way of wrapping everything in stillness. For a moment, it felt like any other Christmas morning, quiet, familiar, expectant. But as I sat up in bed, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, something felt off. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and checked the time, 6:32 a.m. I hadn't planned to get up this early, but my brain had other ideas. It was probably the adrenaline. My boutique's second location in Portland had just cleared final approvals, and the expansion contract was scheduled to be finalized after the holidays. I'd been working toward that goal for years, late nights, back-to-back inventory runs, skipping weekends with friends just to keep my dream alive. As a habit, I opened my banking app, not out of worry, just habit. I blinked. The screen loaded slower than usual, maybe because of the rural Wi-Fi. Then the numbers came up. Balance. Your errands. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to correct itself, like maybe it was a glitch. I refreshed. Still zero. Then I checked my business account. Zero. And my personal savings. Also zero. The world felt like it tilted slightly. I sat perfectly still, heart suddenly hammering. This couldn't be right. I had over $130,000 across my accounts. I'd double-checked everything before leaving Portland 2 days ago. I opened the transaction history. That's when it got worse. The transfers weren't even hidden. They were clean, precise, multiple outgoing wires scheduled just hours ago. Not one of them was flagged. No fraud alerts, no blocked attempts, no notifications. All were tagged as approved from a recognized device. That last part hit me like a cold slap. I hadn't used my accounts in the past 24 hours, but someone had. And not from a new location. No, the log said it was accessed from a device that had already been approved under my profile. A device here, in this house. I sat there for another 10 seconds before slowly lowering my phone. I could hear someone walking around upstairs, pots clinking. The smell of brewed coffee filtered through the hallway. I stood up, pulled on my cardigan, and walked to the window. The front lawn was still coated in silver frost, but I could feel heat behind my eyes. It was still Christmas morning. But something about the way my stomach churned told me this was the day everything would come apart. Hours earlier, Christmas Eve, things had felt almost peaceful. Callista had flown in the night before. She made an entrance, as always, breezing in with a designer bag, new curls, and a laugh that reached every corner of Mom's house. Everyone lit up when she arrived. Mom poured her wine before she even had to ask. Dinner had gone smoothly, if not loudly. Callista had dominated every conversation. Her latest venture, a podcast, or was it a wellness brand? I'd tuned most of it out. I was too tired. I'd left my laptop on the kitchen island for a few minutes when I ran upstairs to help Mom with the spare linens. When I returned, everything looked exactly the same. Apparently, not everything. Now, on Christmas morning, I walked down the hallway slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. The aroma of turkey and cinnamon rolls filled the air. My mother had already turned on the holiday playlist. The fake cheer felt like a slap. In the kitchen, Callista stood by the coffee pot, sipping from a tall mug like she owned the room. Her nails were freshly done, red with tiny silver stars, always on brand for attention. "Morning," she said, too brightly. "You look like you barely slept." I didn't respond. At the table, Mom was already plating scrambled eggs. "Sit, sweetheart. Eat something before it gets cold." I walked to my seat, sat down, and stared directly at my sister. My accounts were emptied last night. Callista didn't flinch. She kept sipping her coffee and raised an eyebrow. I didn't blink. All of them. Every cent. Business. Savings. Personal. Gone. There was a pause. Mom glanced up, frowning slightly. What do you mean, gone? I mean, someone transferred over $130,000 out of my accounts while I was asleep. I looked around the table. From a known device. From this house. The clinking of forks against plates stopped. Callista finally turned to me fully. She smiled, not with warmth, but with smugness. Her voice was honey-laced, but sharp. Prove it, Ms. CEO. The room fell silent. Even the Christmas music felt too loud. Mom cleared her throat, her eyes shifting between us. Girls, it's Christmas. Don't ruin it with work stuff. Callista leaned back in her chair, still sipping. She's just tired, Mom. Probably made a mistake. You know how these business types get. Too many numbers flying around. I didn't answer her. I didn't raise my voice or cause a scene, but my fingers tightened around the edge of my chair, and I looked her dead in the eye. Then you won't mind what's coming next. I hadn't cried yet, but that night, the past came roaring back like a wave I'd tried to forget. After breakfast, the house slowly returned to its usual Christmas routine. Faint music from the living room, the smell of cinnamon rolls warming in the oven, wrapping paper scattered like confetti on the rug. But none of it felt real to me anymore. I moved through it like a ghost, exchanging empty glances and forced smiles. The only thing I could hear clearly was Callista's voice on loop. Prove it, Ms. CEO. I kept my face neutral and waited for a quiet moment. Mid-afternoon, most of the family had stepped outside for a walk through the neighborhood or were dozing off in front of a Hallmark movie. That's when I slipped back into my room upstairs. I shut the door behind me, not slamming, just deliberate. I sat at my desk, my laptop still resting where I'd left it the day before. I hadn't used it since arriving, had no reason to. Until now. The power cord wasn't plugged into the port I usually used. That caught my attention right away. I'd always plugged it into the left USB-C port because the right one had a slightly looser connection. A small detail, but it meant something. My eyes traced the edge of the casing. That's when I saw it. A small USB drive, barely noticeable, tucked into the back port. I slowly pulled it out. The body of the device was standard, silver with a clear cap, but along its edge was a faint smudge of lipstick, red. The exact red Callista wore like armor every day since high school. She wasn't just sloppy, she was smug. She wanted me to find it. Or she didn't care if I did, because in her mind, nothing would ever touch her. I turned to my travel bag and pulled out my secondary laptop, an older model I only used for backups. I plugged the USB in with a steady hand. Nothing visible. The folders were empty to the eye, but I knew how to dig deeper. I navigated to the drive's metadata and found exactly what I needed. Created, 1:34 a.m., December 25th. Modified, 1:36 a.m. Device, registered to Brooke Vance. IP, local access. That was the nail. I took photos of the data screen and forwarded everything to Thane with a message. Tell me what else you can pull. Timestamp confirms it was from inside the house. His response was instant. Got it. I'll scrape the shadow files. Don't touch anything else. Back it up and send me a copy. I saved a copy to my encrypted cloud and backed it onto a separate drive. Then I sat back in the chair and stared at the blank wall. It wasn't just that she took the money, it was how easy it was for her to do it, and how unafraid she was of being caught. Later that evening, while everyone was still lounging or napping, I made my way downstairs. My mother was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of cider. The lights above cast a soft yellow glow that made everything feel warmer than it was. Hey, Mom, I said, keeping my voice casual. Quick question, did Callista borrow my laptop yesterday? She looked up and smiled, then frowned slightly, like I'd asked something off script. Borrow? I don't think so. Why? There was a USB plugged into it just now. Didn't look familiar. She gave a slight shrug and turned back to the stove. You probably left it in there yourself, honey. You've been working non-stop. You're exhausted. I stood in silence for a beat. I think she used my account. My mom turned, a little more sharply this time. Brooke, it's Christmas. Can we not start this? I'm not starting anything, I replied calmly. I'm telling you what I found. She sighed. You're stressed. You always do this when you're overwhelmed. You probably messed something up without realizing it. She emptied $130,000 from my accounts, Mom. She didn't blink. Your sister wouldn't do that. There it was. The sentence I had been hearing in some form since I was old enough to walk. Your sister wouldn't lie. Your sister didn't mean it. Your sister didn't push you. Your sister is just under pressure. The defense of Callista was like breathing for my mother, automatic, instinctive, no evidence required. I nodded slowly and turned to leave. Where are you going? She asked. Back upstairs. I've got some cleaning up to do. I didn't expect her to follow. She didn't. She went back to her cider, humming softly to Bing Crosby. Back in my room, I opened an old Google Doc labeled Boutique 2 Launch Strategy. It had been filled with projections, marketing notes, supplier contacts, years of ideas packed into that one file. I renamed it. Evidence. On the first page, I typed December 25th. Accounts emptied. USB found. Mom doesn't believe me. I paused. Then I added, she never has. I kept typing. Every detail I could remember, every subtle shift, every gap in behavior. When the money was taken, when the USB was inserted, when my cord was moved, every detail became a bullet point. This wasn't about building a case, not yet. It was about building clarity. Because I knew one thing as I stared at that document on the screen. She had done it, and no one was coming to save me. When I was 15, I lost my phone. Or at least that's what they told me. It had been a cheap little flip phone. I'd worked 3 months babysitting twins across the street to afford it. I remember the feel of the case, bright blue with tiny stars on the back, and how proud I was the day I finally brought it home. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine. Then, one day before my birthday, it vanished. I tore through every drawer, every laundry basket, even the garbage. I checked under my bed 3 times. The next morning when I told Mom, her response was immediate, automatic. You probably misplaced it. Don't start pointing fingers. I knew exactly who had taken it, but I didn't say her name, yet. A week later, I walked past Callista's room while she was out and saw it, sitting on her dresser like it had always been there. My blue flip phone, the same stars, same smudge on the back. I walked in, picked it up, and opened it. There was a new SIM card inside. I waited until that evening when she was alone in the kitchen, drying glasses while humming to herself. I held up the phone, said nothing, just waited for her to turn. She barely glanced at it before rolling her eyes. What? That's my phone. No, she said, dragging the word out like I was slow. It's mine. You took it out of my bag, she scoffed, drying her hands with the dish towel. Why would I want your cheap phone? I found it in your drawer. You think I need your stuff? She snapped. Grow up. Then she slapped me. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough that it stunned me. She was 18. I was just barely 15. And when Mom found out what happened, she told me I'd probably upset her, that Callista was under pressure with school, that maybe I'd left the phone somewhere, and this was a different one. I stopped fighting after that. I stopped bringing it up. That's when I learned. In our house, being right didn't matter if you weren't the favorite. Now, sitting alone in my car just outside my mother's house, with my laptop open on my knees and my breath fogging the windshield, that old memory didn't just haunt me. It burned. Because this wasn't the first time, it was the latest. The theft of $130,000 wasn't an isolated betrayal, it was just the most expensive chapter in a lifelong series. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard. I should have been checking my backup files, reviewing the USB metadata again like Thane asked, but I couldn't shake the way my stomach had clenched when I saw that red lipstick stain on the USB port earlier. The same smug signature Callista always left behind. She never worried about being caught because she never had to face consequences. Someone always covered for her, and when they didn't, she deflected, rewrote the story, turned the mirror back on you. You're imagining things, Brooke. You're just tired. You always overreact. Those were the refrains of my childhood, each one a stitch in the quilt of gaslighting that covered everything we did. I closed the laptop and leaned back against the car seat. The cold air seeped through my coat, but I welcomed it. It helped keep my mind sharp, focused. A car passed slowly down the street. Kids laughed somewhere off in the distance, throwing snowballs and chasing one another on the sidewalk. I used to think Christmas was a safe space. Now it felt like a performance I'd never been cast in, only allowed to watch from the wings. Memories poured in. Callista stealing the tutoring money I'd saved in 10th grade, taking credit for the group science project in junior year because she needed the GPA boost more than I did, sneaking out and blaming me for leaving the back door unlocked. And every time I tried to speak up, my mother would cut me off. She didn't mean it, sweetie. She's just going through a lot. She's your sister. Let it go. That's what Mom said the night Callista borrowed my graduation dress and returned it stained. That's what she said when Callista convinced me to co-sign a phone contract at 19 and then stopped paying the bill. This wasn't about money. This was about identity theft, in the most human way possible. Callista hadn't just stolen passwords or routing numbers, she'd been stealing who I was, little by little, my whole life. My phone buzzed. It was Thane. Pulled what I could from the USB, the message read. Encrypted, wiped clean, but I confirmed the file structure was active around 1:34 a.m. Your guess was dead on, definitely tampered with from your network. I took a moment before replying. I knew she'd done this before, but this time, I'm not backing down. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't feel like the 15-year-old who'd once been slapped into silence. I felt like a woman standing at the edge of a choice, and I knew what I was going to do. I drove back slowly, letting my thoughts settle. By the time I parked in the driveway, the sky had shifted to that soft blue-gray that comes before sunset. I could see lights on in the dining room. Laughter again. Callista, no doubt holding court with her stories. I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I opened my laptop again, opened the file I'd renamed Evidence, and started typing. Confirmed, USB used on known device. Metadata timestamp matches suspected breach window. Thane Morgan verifying second-level encryption logs. I added every little thing I remembered. The contract transfer, the sudden vendor silence last month. The extra pair of earrings Callista had been wearing, matching a pair I had designed and never published. I was no longer just documenting what had happened. I was tracking a pattern of erasure. But this time, I wasn't going to be erased. Her Christmas gift to Mom, the necklace I dreamed of buying with my expansion fund. It was almost noon when I stepped into the living room, and the fireplace cast a flickering light over the cluttered coffee table. Mom was sitting on the couch, her robe draped loosely over her shoulders, admiring something small and sparkling in her hands. The sun cut through the window behind her, catching the gleam of a sapphire teardrop necklace nestled inside a velvet box. I stopped short. My breath caught, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because it was mine. Well, not mine in the literal sense. I had never bought it, but I had picked that design from a small artisan shop online weeks ago. I'd bookmarked it after signing the lease on my second boutique location in Portland. It was supposed to be a gift to Mom, something personal, something earned. I'd even written a little note in my phone. After I launch, gift for Mom, sapphire, like her eyes. And now, Callista stood in front of her, smiling, beaming with that confident glow she wore like a tailored suit. Mom always wanted something timeless, she said with a hand on her hip. Eloise's eyes welled up. It's stunning. You didn't have to do this, honey. I didn't move. I watched as my mother reached forward, hugging her like a child who had just handed over a hand-drawn card. It's nothing, Callista replied with a faux shrug. You deserve nice things. I felt it then, deeper than rage, deeper than humiliation, a kind of rot. She hadn't just stolen the money. She stole the moment. Later that day, when the noise of gift wrap and wine had died down, I found myself in the kitchen with Mom. Callista was upstairs taking a call, loud, of course, so everyone knew she was still busy, still important. Mom was washing dishes slowly, humming something old and off-key. Where'd Callista get the necklace? I asked lightly, leaning against the counter. She turned toward me, half smiling. Oh, she's been saving for months. Said she wanted to make this Christmas special. I nodded, said nothing more. Let her go back to the hum of her holiday routine. I didn't ask if Mom remembered me saying I wanted to get her something similar. I didn't mention the sapphire I showed her over dinner in November, because I already knew the answer. She'd probably say, "Oh, you must be misremembering, sweetheart." And even if I wasn't, what would it matter? Upstairs, I opened my laptop again. Thane had just emailed back about the USB. But I needed a break from the evidence, from facts, from screens and proof and timelines. I just needed to sit with the feeling for a minute. I remembered back in July when I first drove past the storefront in Northeast Portland. It was a tiny brick building with ivy climbing up the side, nothing flashy, but it felt right. I could already imagine my logo in the window, the recycled wood checkout counter I had designed sketched out in my notebook. That place represented something I'd built with my own hands, my own debt, my own instincts. And now, I opened my email to double-check a message my real estate lawyer had sent the day before, something about a document signature that needed confirming. Scrolling back through the thread, my eyes landed on one line that made my blood run cold. Just confirming receipt of the revised lease form submitted yesterday. We've attached the final draft here, as signed by C. Marlin. What? I opened the attachment. There it was. The same lease, same address, same terms. But under owner-operator, it read, Callista Marlin. No, that wasn't a coincidence. That wasn't an error. I checked the edit history. Sure enough, the metadata listed her email as the last modifier. She hadn't just taken the money, she took the future I had planned down to the square footage. I sat there for a few minutes, just breathing. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything, but I did something that felt more dangerous than rage. I opened my evidence folder, and I created 3 new subfolders, /gifts, /lease, /past. Into the first, I dropped a screenshot of the necklace from the store's website, along with a new photo of Mom wearing it, snapped earlier that day without anyone noticing. Into the second, I added the lease attachment, my email thread with the lawyer, and the metadata information. And into the third, I began to write. Every incident I could remember, every time she'd chipped away at me inch by inch. The phone, the tutoring cash, the dress, the failed phone contract. The time she invited herself to my product launch and stole the mic during my speech to talk about our journey as sisters. I didn't know what I would do with all of it yet, but I knew one thing. She'd always taken. Always. This time, I was going to make her give it back. Don't let anyone make you small, not even your sister. That was the line he wrote in the final months. His handwriting was slower then, more careful. But the loops still curved with the same tenderness I remembered from grocery lists, birthday cards, and the sticky notes he used to leave on the fridge. He knew he didn't have much time left. We all did, but there was something different about knowing it, about feeling the edges of goodbye inch closer every day. I found the letter tucked inside the cover of the sketchbook he gave me when I turned 22. He'd told me once that blank pages were a kind of freedom, a way to speak when your voice trembled or when it felt like no one was listening. I hadn't drawn in it much, honestly, maybe a few times when the grief got quiet enough to leave room for creativity. But that letter, those words, I'd read them 100 times since the funeral. You don't have to scream to be powerful, Brooke. But don't let their silence erase you. That night, sitting on the edge of my childhood bed, the stolen necklace 3 doors down, and my boutique lease altered without my consent, that line lit something inside me, like a match dragging against bone-dry wood. I folded the letter along its old creases and slid it back into the sketchbook, placing it carefully in the drawer of the desk I once used for homework and college applications. It was nearly midnight when I padded downstairs. The house had long since quieted. The dishwasher murmured in the background, and the antique wall clock in the hallway ticked steadily like a heartbeat. It was the only sound that hadn't changed in all these years. The kitchen light was on. Callista stood there, barefoot, sipping red wine from one of Mom's crystal glasses, the ones we weren't supposed to use outside of holidays. She wasn't surprised to see me. She didn't flinch or hide anything. She just smirked like she'd been expecting this moment all along. "So," she said without turning fully. "Still mad, huh?" Her tone was half daring, half dismissive, the way she always spoke when she thought she had the upper hand. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, not to shield myself, but to stop them from shaking. "Why'd you do it?" I asked. She raised her glass to her lips again and took a slow sip before setting it down with a little too much emphasis on the granite countertop. "Do what?" I stared at her, eyes steady. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." She tilted her head slightly, a lazy shrug accompanying her exhale. "You've always had it easier, Brooke. Mom bent over backward for you. You were the quiet one, the hard worker, the achiever. You know what I got? Expectations. I was supposed to be perfect. You could vanish for weeks, float back in with some new project, and suddenly you were the golden child with your little boutique." I felt the burn of rage ripple across my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "You think I had it easy?" I asked. "You didn't have to prove anything," she said, suddenly louder. "People just liked you." "No," I said, my voice flat but firm. "I had to build everything from the ground up while barely affording rent. You were traveling through Europe. I was stockpiling canned soup and praying my lights didn't get shut off. You think being liked built that store? You think being quiet paid the bills?" Callista's mouth curved into a frown, but she didn't speak. "I missed birthdays. I worked holidays. I hand-sewed fabric into the early hours while you were out at rooftop bars, draining credit cards you never intended to pay off." There was a silence after that, not the kind that waits for reconciliation, the kind that confirmed something irreversible had snapped. "You drained my accounts," I continued. "You logged into my business portal, altered the lease, you forged signatures, you walked into my life and carved out whatever piece you thought you were entitled to." She looked down at her wine glass, then back at me. "You owe me," she said quietly. "One way or another, I was going to get what I deserved." I stepped closer, not with malice, but clarity. Something colder than anger, something older. "You want what I have?" I said. "Then earn it, but I will not let you take what I bled for." She stared at me, stunned. For once, she didn't have a comeback. That smirk had fallen. I turned and walked out, the wood floor creaking beneath my steps. I didn't slam the door when I went back upstairs. I didn't need to. By 1:30 a.m., I was seated at my desk, my laptop casting a pale glow across the room. My fingers moved with precision as I uploaded everything into a private folder I'd created months ago, before I'd even known what Callista was really doing. The folder name? Case Initiated. Inside, I dropped a scanned copy of the original lease, metadata showing timestamps from the altered version, high-res photos of the necklace I hadn't seen in years, now resurfaced in Callista's jewelry drawer. A boutique bookmark she claimed to have found, which I'd hand-designed for my clients months earlier, USB timestamps from the shared computer bank transfer logs she tried to erase, call histories from the boutique landline IP addresses tied to login attempts on nights I was out of town. I wasn't just collecting receipts, I was building a war chest. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't send a message to Mom, begging her to believe me or choose me. That ship had sailed, possibly sunk. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed Thane. It rang twice before he answered. "It's late," he mumbled, voice heavy with sleep. "I'm going to need your help putting together a timeline," I said. "We're moving forward." He was silent for a second. "You sure?" "I'm not asking for permission, Thane. I'm asking if you're in." There was a long pause. Then, "I'm in." I emailed him the encrypted folder and sat back, the weight in my chest shifting. Not lighter, but different. Purposeful. I stared at the ceiling, letting the silence hold me. Not in fear, but in confirmation. I thought about the first time I'd told Callista my dream of opening a boutique. I could still remember the way she laughed, called it a cute idea, said no one bought ethical fashion unless it came with a celebrity endorsement. She told me I was naive, that I was small. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the quiet sibling hiding in the corners of a family story that never had room for me. I was done trying to make space. Now I was building my own, and this time, no one was going to take it. The transfer history didn't lie. Thane found the shell wallets. I was sitting at the small desk in my childhood bedroom, the same desk I used in high school to write college applications and late-night journal entries. Now it was covered with folders, 2 laptops, and a legal pad with a growing list of time-stamped anomalies. My hands were steady, eyes clear, and heart strangely calm as Thane's message came through. "You were right," the text read. "The money moved through 3 shell wallets, all of them linked back to a burner account created from your home network. She didn't even cover her tracks." There it was, confirmation, not just from my gut or memory, but digital proof. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was premeditated theft. I stared at the screen, letting the weight of his words land. It wasn't just the money, though the number was staggering. It was the smugness, the audacity, and the fact that Callista assumed I'd either be too weak to confront her or too scared to expose her. She was wrong on both counts. I stood up, paced for a moment, and then reached into the drawer near my bed. Months ago, after a small break-in at my boutique's back office, I bought a mini cam off a tech site. Discreet, motion-activated. I installed it at my Portland apartment, and when I came home for the holidays, I'd brought it with me. Habit, more than anything. Just in case. Turns out, that habit had paid off. I retrieved the small device from its hiding spot near the bookshelf, plugged it into my second laptop, and let the footage load. It was slow, grainy, but eventually the frame came into view. My bedroom at 1:31 a.m., December 25th. The same night the money disappeared. The footage skipped every 5 seconds unless it detected motion. Then I saw her, Callista, in mom's robe, her hair tied back, moving quickly but confidently, like someone who had done this before. She sat at my desk, opened my laptop, plugged in my USB, and began typing. I leaned in, my pulse spiking. There was no audio, but the footage didn't need it. It showed enough. The glow of the screen on her face, her hands flying across my keyboard. The pause where she leaned back and smirked, satisfied. I whispered out loud to no one. "Got you." A few hours later, just after sunrise, I made myself a cup of coffee and waited for the house to wake up. Mom shuffled downstairs first, then my aunt, then a few cousins. Callista was always last. She appeared around 10 a.m., still yawning, feigning exhaustion. I didn't say anything, not yet. Instead, I returned to my room, organized everything. USB logs, IP address documentation, lease metadata, the camera footage, and now, Thane's wallet trace. It was enough to make a case. More than enough. By mid-morning, I called a lawyer I'd met 2 years ago at a local Portland entrepreneur meetup. Lisa Sharma. She was sharp, quiet, and efficient. Exactly what I needed. "Lisa, this is Brooke Vance. I need to run something by you, off the record for now." "Of course," she said, her tone cool and calm. "Talk to me." I walked her through what had happened, summarizing the transactions, the forged documents, the security footage, and the digital trail Callista had carelessly left behind. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "That's fraud. Potentially identity theft, digital intrusion, and wire transfer abuse," she said. "You haven't reported this yet?" "Not yet. I'm documenting everything before I go public, or press charges." "Smart. Keep all devices untouched. I'll draft a preliminary statement. If you want to move forward formally, I can have something filed by Tuesday. I'm not sure I'll need to file, yet, but I need leverage. She's not going to stop unless she knows I'm serious." "You are," Lisa said firmly. "You just proved it." I thanked her, hung up, and sat back down. My mind was racing, but it was the kind of racing that felt focused, not frantic. I was no longer panicking. I was planning. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. The buzz of Christmas Day had dulled. Most of the family had either flown home or were leaving early the next morning. Only Mom, Callista, and I remained at the table, pushing food around on our plates. I watched Callista as she buttered a roll, humming to herself. When the silence stretched too long, I spoke. "You know," I said casually, "I've been thinking a lot about boundaries lately." Callista looked up, head tilted. "Have you?" she said, almost amused. Yeah, especially when it comes to people crossing lines, taking things they didn't earn, claiming what was never theirs. The room chilled slightly. Mom looked between us but said nothing. Because people think they can do whatever they want, I continued, as long as they smile while doing it. But eventually, the truth shows up, loud or quiet, doesn't matter. It always gets heard. Callista set her fork down slowly. What are you even talking about? Just something to keep in mind, I said, still calm. Because anyone who messes with someone's life's work, they should be ready for consequences. She didn't smirk this time. Instead, for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something new in her eyes. Concern. And that was enough for now. I cleared my plate, excused myself, and headed back upstairs. Inside my room, I opened a clean folder on my desktop titled, Final. This wasn't a bluff. It was a countdown. She didn't just sabotage my inventory. She tried to erase my entire name. The next morning started like most others had that week. Quiet, tense, too still for a house full of family. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. 3 missed calls, all from different vendors. At first, I assumed it was post-holiday confusion. Maybe someone wanted to confirm their delivery windows had shifted. But when I returned the first call, reality hit like a fist to the ribs. Hey, Brooke, the woman's voice came through, clipped and polite. Just following up on your cancellation request yesterday. Cancellation? I blinked. I didn't cancel anything. There was a pause on the line. We received an email yesterday morning from your listed account, well, from what looked like your account, asking us to halt production and cancel all pending shipments. We've already refunded the deposits. I nearly dropped my mug. Do you still have that email? Sure, she said. We thought it was odd, but, the holidays, people get overwhelmed. The next 2 calls were nearly identical. Each one confirmed the same story. Someone pretending to be me, using a near-identical email address, had contacted my vendors and pulled the plug on every major order I had scheduled for January. Fabric, labels, packaging, gone. I pulled up the original messages. The email looked like mine at a glance. Same signature, similar phrasing. But the domain name was off by 1 letter. A substitution barely noticeable unless you were actively searching for it. And that's when I understood. This wasn't just about draining my account or stealing my lease. Callista was dismantling the infrastructure of my business, piece by piece, behind my back. She wanted to make sure that when I finally tried to rebuild, there'd be nothing left to stand on. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I opened my notes app and added a new section. Email interference. 3 vendor cancellations. Fake domain. Brookevancy at, note, CC. Compare against IP logs with Thane. I saved it, locked the phone, and stepped outside for air. The cold slapped my cheeks the moment I crossed the porch. I stood there for a while, breathing in sharp winter air, counting to 10 just to steady myself. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Danny, my college roommate and one of the few people I still trusted with anything close to a personal update. Her message read, "Holy hell! Congrats on the profile! You didn't tell me Forbes Local was doing a piece on you." I stared at the screen. What profile? She sent a screenshot. The headline read, "Meet the woman redefining ethical fashion in the Northwest." The image beneath the title made my stomach turn. It was Callista, standing in front of my boutique, wearing one of my custom-designed coats, holding a reusable coffee cup with my logo on it, and the caption, Callista Marlin, founder and creative director of The Rooted Thread. That name, my shop. I felt something inside me rupture. I walked to my car, opened the door, sat down, and just stared out the windshield. It wasn't even raining. It wasn't even dramatic. It was just silent. And in that silence, I started to shake. Not with sadness, not even rage, with pure, focused fury. She didn't want to be me. She wanted to erase me. I wasn't crying. I didn't even feel like crying. I reached into my bag, pulled out my iPad, and connected to the boutique's old newsletter platform. I hadn't used it in months, not since we pivoted to social content. but the contact list was still there. Customers, investors, press. I drafted a simple teaser. Hi, friends. Over the next few days, I'll be sharing something personal. Something that affects not just me, but what it means to create, build, and protect what you love. Proof, patterns, paper trails. Coming soon. Brooke. Before hitting send, I hesitated. This was the line. Once I crossed it, there was no walking it back. But then I thought of the lease, the necklace, the footage, and all the years before it. I hit send. Within the hour, the replies started trickling in. Are you okay? Just saw something weird on LinkedIn. Is that your sister? Brooke, we've always believed in your work. Whatever's happening, we're behind you. It wasn't a tidal wave. Not yet. But it was movement. It was air after being underwater too long. Back inside the house, I walked past Callista on the stairs. She had her phone in her hand and barely glanced up. She smiled, smug and effortless. You look tired. I smiled right back. You should be. I kept walking. The email landed. The courtroom date was set. She never saw it coming. 3 days before we were due in court, I was back at my apartment in Portland, sitting on the floor surrounded by manila folders and empty coffee cups. The rain tapped steadily against the windows. I hadn't slept more than 5 hours in the past 2 nights, but I felt sharp, clear in a way I hadn't been since Christmas. The case was airtight. I knew that, but knowing it and believing it were 2 different things. Until I got Ronan's message. It came through my encrypted account late that afternoon. A voice memo, labeled simply, "For you." The playback began scratchy, but I recognized the voice right away, hers. You seriously think she'll fight this? Callista was laughing, the same laugh she always used when she thought no one could touch her. I changed the damn lease already. She'll break before court. There was a short pause, then Ronan's voice, low, tired. She's not gonna break. Callista scoffed. Please, she's Brooke. She folds when someone just questions her tone. Then Ronan again. Maybe she deserves to win this time. I listened to it twice, once to absorb it, once to transcribe. Then I added it to the evidence folder, right under the section labeled Intent. That recording sealed it. When Tuesday morning arrived, I wore black slacks, a slate blue blouse, and the coat I'd sewn myself back when the boutique was just a dream on paper. Thane picked me up at 7:45 sharp, and we drove the hour and a half to Marion County Courthouse mostly in silence. He didn't have to say anything. His presence alone made me feel like someone was in my corner. Courtrooms are quieter than most people imagine. There's no dramatic music, no angry outbursts, just fluorescent lighting, murmured legalese, and the occasional squeak of a chair moving slightly. Callista showed up 15 minutes late. She wore a camel-colored trench coat and oversized sunglasses, like she was hoping to turn the hearing into a fashion moment. Mom was with her. They sat on the opposite side of the room. Callista didn't look at me once. Mom did, though, but only briefly, like she was trying to convince herself she didn't recognize me. The judge called the session to order. My attorney, Lisa, stood up and began outlining our case, a systematic effort to undermine my business, identity theft, forged digital documentation, financial manipulation, and reputational damage. Exhibits A through F were presented, each one confirming what I had known for weeks. IP logs traced back to our mother's house, time-stamped USB file creation, footage from the minicam, modified lease agreement, email, spoofing metadata. And now, the voice memo. Lisa's delivery was calm but precise. By the time she sat down, there was nothing left to question. Callista's attorney tried to deflect, suggesting miscommunication, family tension, and business overlap as possible explanations, but even he seemed half-hearted. At one point, Callista leaned over and whispered something to him. He didn't even write it down. The judge paused, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at Callista. You are hereby ordered to repay the plaintiff $126,400 in restitution. The court recognizes the intentional sabotage of business operations and identity misrepresentation. You are barred from using or referencing the Rooted Thread brand, its likeness, or its affiliates in any personal or professional manner effective immediately. Any further misrepresentation will result in contempt of court. My heart didn't leap. My hands didn't shake. I just exhaled. Not the kind of breath you take before something big, but the kind you release when a boulder has been sitting on your chest for weeks and someone finally lifts it. The bailiff approached Callista with quiet instructions. She stood, her chin high, refusing to look in my direction as she walked out, flanked by 2 officers. Mom didn't follow her. She just sat there, still, looking down at her lap, as if something very old and very hollow had just cracked inside her. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. The story had gotten out, probably leaked by someone in the legal team or even a vendor who'd seen the teaser I'd posted. Microphones were shoved in my face as I stepped through the front doors. "Brooke, any comment? How does it feel to win? What happens now for your brand?" I held my hands up slightly. "No, not yet." And then I looked straight into the camera. Not to smile, not to speak, just to be seen. That evening, back in my apartment, I sat alone on the couch, barefoot, holding a mug of tea I hadn't sipped. My phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, texts, emails, some from old friends, some from strangers, some from customers. But I didn't check any of them. Instead, I scrolled back through the voice memo from Ronan and played it one more time. Not to prove anything, not to gloat, just to remind myself what it sounds like when someone finally tells the truth, even if it's late. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed a single sentence at the top. She lost more than a case. I lost a mother. It wasn't revenge I wanted, just my name back. The weeks after the courtroom felt strangely quiet, almost padded, like walking through snow in heavy boots. The noise was gone. No more depositions, no more discovery deadlines, no more calls with Lisa, my attorney, just space. Callista had been formally charged with felony fraud and was out on bond awaiting sentencing. There was talk of a plea deal, but I didn't ask for updates. I didn't care if she got 6 months, 6 years, or probation. My goal was never punishment. It was truth, public, undeniable, and permanent. But the silence came with a cost. Eloise hadn't spoken to me since the verdict. She'd walked out of the courtroom alone, her expression unreadable. I watched her go, but I didn't follow. Neither of us did. Since then, the silence had become mutual. 2 days after the trial, I'd sent her a short message. "I hope you're okay. I'm here if you ever want to talk." She didn't reply. A week later, I got word from a family friend that she'd withdrawn from her volunteer work at the food bank and canceled the annual neighborhood brunch she hosted every February for the past 15 years. She hasn't been herself, they said. People are talking. Some won't return her calls. Apparently, the quiet pride she'd worn like pearls all these years had begun to crack. The final words she ever spoke to me, after the judge read the ruling, still rang in my ears. "You're a disgrace to this family." That was it. No questions, no apologies. Just that. And so I stopped waiting. The truth is, I didn't need a mother who needed me to stay silent in order to be loved. I needed a life that reflected what I actually built. Alone, messy, honest. Not perfect, but mine. Around the same time, something else began to unfold. Quietly at first, like a single drop into still water. A post had gone up on Reddit, a user recounting my story under the headline, "She lost 130K but didn't lose herself." It was simple, raw, and unfiltered. No names, just the outline of betrayal, truth, and court justice. Then it spread. Other women began to comment. My sister drained my savings when I was in chemo. No one believed me either. My husband forged my signature to get a second mortgage. I was told to keep quiet for the sake of the kids. My mom always believed my brother, even when I had bruises. It kept going. And then, slowly, messages started coming to me. Some through the boutique's contact form, some to my personal email. A few were handwritten letters mailed to my store. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me courage to leave my toxic family and open the bakery I always dreamed of. I call it brave girl bread. Thank you." Another, "I watched your case unfold. I cried when the judge ruled in your favor. I'm still waiting for justice. but I'm not afraid to speak anymore. Validation didn't come from the family I'd been born into. It came from the community I didn't even know I had. And for the first time, I believed them when they said, "You're not alone." Exactly 1 month after the hearing, I opened the doors to my second boutique in Portland. The new space was on a corner lot. Sunlight streamed in through the tall front windows all morning, catching the light off the reclaimed wood shelves I'd helped sand myself. The walls were painted sage green, and the fitting rooms had brass hooks shaped like tiny oak leaves. But the sign outside was what meant the most: third chance. Because the first was surviving, the second was reclaiming, and this was starting again, but on my own terms. When customers walked in that first day, I greeted them with quiet gratitude. I didn't mention the case, I didn't explain the name, I just welcomed them, the way I had always dreamed of doing back when I only had one register and no heat in the winter. On the wall behind the counter, I'd hung two things. One, a framed photograph of my first pop-up booth. You could see me in the background, 19 years old. Awkward posture, hands folded in front of a folding table stacked with hand-stitched scarves. The other, a folded piece of stationery, mounted behind glass. My father's letter. "You don't have to scream to be powerful, Brooke, but don't let their silence erase you." I read it now like scripture. Not because I needed the reminder anymore, but because I hoped someone else would. I still hadn't spoken to Callista. I wasn't sure I ever would. I hadn't forgiven her. But I'd stopped carrying the weight of her choices on my shoulders. Let her face the world without my silence to prop her up. As for Mom, well, I no longer looked for her name in my inbox. I'd made peace with the fact that some mothers can only love the child who makes them look good, not the one who tells the truth. And that's okay. Because love rooted in conditions isn't love, it's performance. As the store filled with customers that afternoon, some old, some new, I stepped behind the register and took a breath. Not because I was nervous, because I felt free. She stole money. I got it back. She stole credit. I reclaimed it. She tried to steal my voice. Now I speak for women who never got their second chance. And if you're listening, maybe this is yours. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with truth. Brooke didn't win her family back, but she reclaimed something more powerful: her voice, her dignity, and her future. So here's the question. What would you do if someone you loved crossed the line and erased you? Would you stay silent or fight back? Tell me in the comments, and if you want more real, raw stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.